Well, hello there, good people. Hi, I'm Jason with Green Country Agroforestry, and today is July 15th, midway through July in this year of the rainy summer. And before the rain catches up with us later on this afternoon, I thought it would be nice to take you around and show you how things are growing in the garden this year. So come on. Let's begin with a progress report on two of our plants here. The one down here to your right is a little tiny fig tree. We had fig trees planted here a couple of years ago, and we dug them up, but we had some roots still in the ground. This one's just a volunteer from those roots. But this guy we just planted over the winter. This is a Szechuan pepper tree. It's actually a prickly ash, and it produces little tiny peppercorns used for making Oriental cuisine. The leaves have a taste similar to black pepper. Alright, so this is a Cayenne pepper plant, and as you can tell from looking at my hand next to it, it's very short. This is middle of July. This is as tall as this plant has gotten, and I started out with a dozen of these. I'm down to just two. The alternating cool weather and rain and then hot weather has just confused the snot out of these plants. They don't know what to do. But it is producing peppers, so we will have some chili peppers this year, but not fantastic. The jalapeno peppers that my neighbor is growing are turning out a lot better than any of my peppers this year. Alright, it's the first time for me growing this particular plant here. This one is a pink Soba Buckwheat. It's a perennial buckwheat that produces these little tiny pink flowers in great profusion whenever it's a bit older. This is the first year growing this plant. First year for this plant here, and first year for me growing it, so we're just getting used to each other. Next to that, I've got it's like some alfalfa coming up. So we have a nitrogen fixer and something that likes to eat a lot of nitrogen. Buckwheat is it's a flower that produces a seed that is used like a grain, though it is technically not actually a grain plant. So we're going to be growing these and seeing how well they turn out. I'm a little bit excited to see if they produce anything worthwhile. They tell me that the perennial buckwheats don't produce as much seed as the annual buckwheats. So if you have the regular old white-flowered annual buckwheat plant, it'll produce more grain. But you have the advantage here of a perennial. I don't have to plant it every year, and whenever they get older and produce a lot of these little tiny pink flowers, it'll look like an ornamental plant that I'm growing instead of something that I'm producing for food. So yet another way of sneaking something under the noses of the Homeowners Association, if that's something you have to worry about. All right, our Bomb Monarda, this is the Monarda, I think, fistula, with the pink flowers, is coming to an end of its life cycle. Of course, we'll have lots of seeds being made in these flower heads here that we can collect and plant more in the future if we want more of this particular variety with the pink flowers. I do have another plant coming up with pink flowers. You already saw it, the buckwheat, but these produce profuse flowers with lots of action for bees, bumblebees, and regular honeybees as well. Back behind that, we've got something that I'm trying out new this year. You see that gourd vine growing up the trellis here. Well, not trellis, really, it's the decorative ironwork. The decorative ironwork on the porch, and it's growing up quite nicely. This one is a bottle gourd, or calabash. You can grow these until they reach maturity and then use the gourds as containers, bottles, of course, birdhouses, or if you pick the gourds whenever they're young and tender, they can be used as a fresh vegetable like a summer squash. Well, this one hasn't produced any squash yet. It's finally getting some heat and starting to grow. It's been waiting for the heat to come. Finally we're getting it, maybe, possibly. Or we might be back into weather in the 60s again after today. Who knows? All right, now our sage here is past its flowering point, but it did really well. Still healthy. Suffering about, well, you can tell, a little bit of grasshopper depredation. There's more grasshoppers there. We're just not having the bird activity that we really need to get rid of the grasshoppers. Of course, now that they're done with the flowers, they've produced their seeds, which I can strip off here, which gives us the opportunity to get more sage plants started. All right, now I'm really sorry about that noise that you hear in the background. That is our air conditioner running, and We just have to keep it going because it's too darn hot out right now. It's up in the 90s. This is one of our Stella de Oro daylilies. I've showed this to you about a week or two ago, and amazingly enough, look at this. We've got more pods coming on, more flowers starting to form. It's not done yet. It is not anywhere close to done yet, but of course it's producing every day for us. And this is part of our daily food that we eat around here, or at least I do. Of course, I'm not the only one eating. As you can tell, we've got more grasshopper activity going on, and they are really going to town on some of our plants here. So sweet. All the nectar in these. Here we have another prickly ash. This is a Sancho pepper tree. It is the Japanese variation of prickly ash, much like the Szechuan pepper tree. This one grew over in Japan, and it produces peppercorns as well. Also, leaves that taste an awful lot like black pepper, and you can tell the grasshoppers have been enjoying those leaves quite a bit. Shoot, they're even eating a little bit on this walking onion that's right here. That's grasshopper action. That's not me eating those. There, folks. Off over here to the side, we've got yet another volunteer fig tree. I don't know if we're going to do anything with this. Maybe transplant it later on this year. And that's the top of some of these onions that we're just going to cover up with mulch and hope we get some water on and see if we can get a couple new plants started. Now, some of you might recall earlier this year I did a little Can I Plant That segment with bird feed, and I used the peanuts out of bird feed. Well, that's what we've got here. This is a peanut plant. Nice yellow blossoms for developing. Eventually these blossoms are going to turn into pegs that go down into the ground and will form the nuts underground beneath the mulch layer right there. So we have our peanuts developing and growing. Good to see. Before you is the mighty pecan tree. Yep. Producer of hundreds of pounds of nuts at maturity every year, but right now it's still getting there. Right there, you're going to see a webworm nest. I had hoped that by attracting more birds to the yard, we could get them to maybe do something about the webworms, but it looks like we're still going to have to go up and manually deal with webworms. I did see this is yarrow. It's a wild yarrow. It'll have white flowers whenever it comes up and produces. And these are plants that I collected while we were at the YouTube meetup in Pryor, Oklahoma earlier this year. We had the opportunity to find some yarrow growing wild in a meadow there, and I took a few cuttings and got them started, and they are now growing really well here. So hopefully we'll have some of that wild yarrow now growing in their yard. This Bartlett pear tree is only 4 years old, maybe 5. It's either its 4th or 5th year. 2 years ago, when it was still a very young tree, the shop across the street suffered a loss of its roof during a high wind event, we'll call it that. Not exactly a tornado, but an extremely high wind, straight line wind sort of event. Took the roof off, made out of sheet metal. The sheet metal flew across the yard. It hit the pecan tree behind you and completely shredded this pear tree, killed it off all the way down to right about here where my hand is down below. Oh, is that Bermuda grass? You don't want Bermuda grass going to seed. All right. But it is beginning to make its way back, and with some artful pruning, it'll develop a nice vase shape and make good pears for us here in another year or so. Probably next year it'll start fruiting again. There's another little baby hazelnut tree starting from a sucker. Oh, there's another one back there. There's another one here. Oh, this is another one right here too, by the way. All right, so there's our tag where we put a number to this tree so we know which one it is. So as you can see, we got numerous baby hazelnut trees after 3 years being spawned by the first one we planted here. So they're coming along quite nicely. Some of these have started to tassel, so either this year or next year we'll be beginning to get nuts from them in the 3rd or maybe 4th year. 3rd or 4th year. 3rd year, we start seeing the suckers so we can start propagating more plants. 4th year, we're probably going to get our first nut harvest out of them. Okay, before I get too far away from it, I want to show you this little volunteer here. This is an annual plant. This is an amaranth. And whenever they're young baby plants, they have red to purplish surface of the leaves. Of course, they're green and red and purple with nice, see that purple underside. That's an immature plant. Let me show you what they look like whenever they get a little bit older. Just a little bit. staple crop in South America for thousands of years, Amaranth. Here it is. This is elephant trunk amaranth. This is just a particular way the flower head for this type of amaranth grows. There are many different types, lots of different flowers. Stunning display in this particular case of a nice dark red to burgundy flower head. And these guys, whenever they get to full size, will be about 1.5 feet wide and maybe up to about 3 foot long. This long trunk like an elephant's trunk coming up here, as you can see. These seed heads will produce at least 1 pound of seeds a piece. Little tiny seeds, smaller than 1 millimeter, which are perfect for making microgreens. All the plants that you see in the row right in front of you where I'm standing are volunteers. One of the things that makes the amaranth such a wonderful plant is the readiness with which it will volunteer. I have not planted amaranth for about 3 years now, and each successive generation automatically reseeds itself. The only thing I really need to do is decide where I want the plants to be and then thin them out accordingly. That's really about it. They like full sun. I've tried them in shady locations. They don't do really well in shady locations. Out here, even in the relatively poor soil that's beneath our feet, I know I've been mulching and it's been improving the soil, but they send their roots down deep. They like to mine the subsoil, excellent for pulling up phosphorus. And as I said before, great as a microgreen source if you're looking for something to grow to have your own microgreens. Great plant.